What's going on? What's going on today, bro?
The demons, man.
Demons?
Voices.
Yeah, no problem.
Those words would later echo across the entire country. But on February 14th, 2018, most people had never even heard his name. His name was Nikolas Cruz. And just hours before that interrogation, he walked into his former high school in Parkland, Florida. February 14th, Valentine's Day. At Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, students were finishing their classes and getting ready to go home. The day felt completely ordinary, until a former student approached the campus carrying a black backpack. What investigators would later discover was that there had been warnings. Many warnings. Some of them had even reached the FBI months before the attack. Someone left a comment under a YouTube video. "I'm going to be a professional school shooter." The comment was reported to the FBI, but the person behind the account was never identified. And then another warning arrived. January 5th, 2018. A woman called the FBI tip line. She said Nikolas Cruz was posting threats online, talking about weapons and might carry out a school shooting. The call was documented, but the information was never forwarded to the local FBI office. He arrived that afternoon just before the end of the school day. Students were already beginning to leave their classrooms. Some were heading to buses, others were meeting friends before going home. To anyone watching, Nikolas Cruz looked like any other student. He carried a backpack. Inside it was a semi-automatic rifle and multiple loaded magazines. Cruz had once been a student at this very school, but months earlier he had been expelled. Teachers had reported disturbing behavior, anger, threats, and a growing fascination with weapons. Still, on that afternoon, no one stopped him. Security cameras later showed him walking across the campus, moving toward Building 12. Inside that building, dozens of students were still in class. At 2:19 p.m., Nikolas Cruz entered the building. Moments after entering the building, Nikolas Cruz opened his backpack. Students nearby barely noticed. Some thought he was just another student heading home for the day. Then, the fire alarm went off. The loud alarm echoed through the hallways of Building 12. Students began leaving their classrooms. Some were confused. Others assumed it was just another drill. But this was not a drill. Within seconds, panic began spreading through the corridors. Students started running. Teachers tried to lock doors, and calls to 911 began flooding in. Outside the building, other students looked up confused by the sound of the alarm and the growing chaos. Inside, surveillance cameras were quietly recording everything. Every movement, every step, every second of what was happening in the hallways. The fire alarm had forced students into the hallways. That was exactly what Cruz wanted. Moments later, the first shots rang out. At first, some students froze. Others thought it might be construction noise. But within seconds, the reality became clear. Students began running, teachers started locking doors, and terrified calls to 911 began flooding the police lines. Inside Building 12, classrooms were thrown into chaos. Students hid under desks. Some barricaded doors. Others ran through stairwells trying to escape the building. The entire attack would last only a few minutes. By the time it was over, 17 people had lost their lives. And while sirens were already racing toward the school, Nikolas Cruz was walking away from the campus. The next images were captured by the school's surveillance cameras. They show what happened inside that afternoon.
Oh my God!
After leaving the campus, Nikolas Cruz did not run. He simply walked away along the streets of Parkland. Around him, students were crying, calling their parents, and running from the school. But Cruz blended into the crowd. Security cameras later showed him stopping at a nearby McDonald's restaurant. He bought a drink and sat among other customers. At that moment, police across Broward County were already searching for the person responsible. Nearly an hour later, a police officer from the Coral Springs Police Department noticed a young man walking alone along the road. The officer stopped him and asked a simple question. "Do you go to Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School?" Nikolas Cruz answered, "Yes." He was taken into custody without resistance. Within hours, investigators would begin the interrogation that shocked the entire country.
What's going on? What's going on today, bro?
The demons, man.
Demons?
Voices.
After his arrest, Nikolas Cruz was taken to a police interrogation room. Investigators wanted to understand what had happened inside the school. For hours, detectives questioned him, trying to piece together the events of that afternoon. At times, Cruz spoke quietly, barely looking up from the table. Then he began talking about voices. He told investigators that he had been hearing them for a long time, voices that he believed were demons. According to Cruz, those voices kept repeating the same words: burn, kill, destroy. When detectives asked him why he did it, Cruz gave a disturbing answer. He said the demons told him to do it. The following clips come from the police interrogation of Nikolas Cruz.
What are the voices about?
It's another voice, the evil side.
Okay. And how long has that voice been going on?
Years.
Okay. When did it start, you think? When your mom passed?
It started, worse when my mom passed.
Okay. Did it start how many years before your mom passed, do you think?
When my father died.
Okay. Did you ever tell anybody about the voice? Never? And what does the voice say to you? Well, what does it tell you to do?
Burn, kill, destroy.
The interrogation would become one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence in the entire investigation. But it was only the beginning of a long legal process. For years, the case of Nikolas Cruz moved through the courts. Investigators gathered evidence, witnesses testified, and families of the victims waited for justice. In 2022, a jury finally reached its decision. Nikolas Cruz was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The court rejected the death penalty, a decision that sparked intense debate across the country. For the families of the 17 victims, the loss can never be undone. But the events of February 14th, 2018 would forever change the community of Parkland. And the words Nikolas Cruz spoke in that interrogation room continue to haunt the case to this day.